For the revolutions of men change nothing. The only influence that can really upset the injustice and iniquity of men is the power that breathes in Christian tradition, renewing our participation in the life that is the light of men. To those who have no personal experience of this revolutionary aspect of Christian truth, but who see only the outer crust of dead human conservatism that tends to form around the church the way barnacles gather on the hull of a ship, all this talk of dynamism sounds foolish. Each individual Christian and each new age of the church has to make this rediscovery, this return to the source of Christian life. It demands a fundamental act of renunciation that accepts the necessity of starting out on the way to God under the guidance of other men. This acceptance can be paid for only by sacrifice, and ultimately only a gift of God can teach us the difference between the dry outer crust of formality which the church sometimes acquires from the human natures that compose it, and the living inner current of divine life which is the only real Catholic tradition. The notion of dogma terrifies men who do not understand the church. They cannot conceive that a religious doctrine may be clothed in a clear, definite, and authoritative statement without at once becoming static, rigid, and inert, and losing all its vitality. In their frantic anxiety to escape from any such conception, they take refuge in a system of beliefs that is vague and fluid, a system in which truths pass like mists and waver and vary like shadows. They make their own personal selection of ghosts in this pale, indefinite twilight of the mind. They take good care never to bring these abstractions out into the full brightness of the sun, for fear of a full view of their unsubstantiality. They favor the Catholic mystics with a sort of sympathetic regard, for they believe that these rare men somehow reach the summit of contemplation in defiance of Catholic dogma. Their deep union with God is supposed to have been an escape from the teaching authority of the Church and an implicit protest against it. But the truth is that the saints arrived at the deepest and most vital, and also the most individual and personal knowledge of God precisely because of the Church's teaching authority, precisely through the tradition that is guarded and fostered by that authority. The first step to contemplation is faith, and faith begins with an assent to Christ teaching through his Church. Fides ex auditu, qui nos audit, me audit. He that heareth you heareth me, and faith cometh by hearing. It is not the dry formula of a dogmatic definition by itself that pours light into the mind of a Catholic contemplative, but the assent to the content of that definition deepens and broadens into a vital, personal, and incommunicable penetration of the supernatural truth which it expresses, an understanding that is a gift of the Holy Ghost, and which merges into the wisdom of love to possess truth in its infinite substance, God Himself. The dogmas of Catholic faith are not merely symbols or vague rationalizations which we accept as arbitrary points of stimulation around which good moral actions may form or develop. Still less is it true that any idea would serve just as well as those that have been defined. Any old pious thought would foment this vague moral life in our souls. The dogmas defined and taught by the Church have a very precise, positive, and definite meaning, which those who have the grace to do so must explore and penetrate if they would live an integral spiritual life. For the understanding of dogma is the proximate and ordinary way to contemplation. Everybody who can do so ought to acquire something of a theologian's accuracy and sharpness in appreciating the true sense of dogma. Every Christian ought to have as deep a comprehension of his belief as his state will allow him, and this means that everyone ought to breathe the clean atmosphere of orthodox tradition and be able to explain his belief in correct terminology, and terminology with a content of genuine ideas. Yet true contemplation is not arrived at by an effort of the mind. On the contrary, a man could easily lose his way in the forest of technical details which concern a professional theologian. But God gives true theologians a hunger born of humility, which cannot be satisfied with formulas and arguments, and which looks for something closer to God than analogy can bring you. This serene hunger of the Spirit penetrates the surface of words and goes beyond the human formulation of mysteries and seeks, in the humiliation of silence, intellectual solitude, and interior poverty, the gift of a supernatural apprehension which words cannot truly signify. Beyond the labor of argument, it finds rest in faith.